So let's continue with absolute reflection. And we ventured into speculatio, specularus, speculum, and that there is an inherent criticism in modern society of the speculative side of our thinking because it doesn't pertain directly to reality, the given. Before we go into further discussion of philosophical achievement of this critique of reflexivity, might be useful to assert that speculation is not a diffuse or occult enterprise. Speculation is rooted, as hermeneutic philosophers such as Gadamer and Ricoeur remind us, in language itself, or to be more precise, in the philosophical concept of language. Sorry about the traffic. At the very moment that language is understood as more than a pragmatic tool for representing what is, although this view does not escape the philosophical concept of language, it vouches for the possibility of articulating a relation to the whole of being and of expressing it in language. And this is something we also recognize from Austin, one of the language philosophers. Because language realizes meaning in speech or writing, and also because it makes communication and understanding possible, it must, in philosophical terms, be thought of as a totalizing medium. Undoubtedly, Hegel, who brought the Greek philosophy of the Logos to its full completion, at first conceived of speculative meditation as an operation of thought alone. But since speculation is effective or real where it finds its exposition in the speculative proposition, it cannot be altogether severed from the medium of language. Indeed, it presupposes the possibility of linguistic utterance and exposition. Let us look more closely at what Hegel understands by the speculative proposition, which destroys the ordinary notion of the proposition. Although Hegel discusses the speculative proposition in the preface to Phenomenally and in the last pages of Science of Logic, as well as in a number of passages from his encyclopedia, I shall consider only the discussion in the preface, since it's here that he is most explicit on the subject. Speaking of speculative proposition, Hegel writes, "The general nature of the judgment or proposition, which involves the distinction of subject and predicate, is destroyed by speculative proposition. And the proposition of identity, which the former becomes, contains the counter thrust against that subject-predicate relationship. The speculative proposition is thus said to alter radically the relation between subject and predicate in predicate sentences or empirical propositions. The common structure of judgment or proposition consists from an Aristotelian or Cartesian perspective of the predication of a subject within the horizon of a determination of truth as a certitude. This is important. But why should it be important to overturn the structure of predication? And what happens to that structure in speculative proposition? Well, I'm just going to put in here what is predication. Well, predication about something could be predication of the object, where it is positioned, for instance, in the Cartesian coordinate system. That's a predication. It's similar to an adjective, and sometimes in linguistics we call adjectives predicates, or what sort of predicates. The thing that tells what something is, or the properties of something. Yeah, the properties of something. And properties could actually be said to be positions as well. And how you can discern between a position of what something is, that's another question. Well, it's actually part of the question I'm posing here in the book as a whole. Ratiocinative thought, argues Hegel, well, you have to look that up, is adequately expressed within the usual structures of common proposition, because it conceives of the content of its thoughts in the same way as it conceives of the subject of the proposition. That is, as an underlying substance, a hypokeimenon or hypokeimenon, Greek, whose attributes are by definition clearly distinguishable. Yet the content of speculative thought is such that it destroys the structure of the ordinary proposition. As we have seen, differences in the content of speculation, such as subject and object, or subject and attributes, are determined within the totality of which they are bipartite manifestation. Bipartite means togetherness, or together in two. The content of the speculative proposition is the identity of the self-determining concept and thought itself. Therefore, the common proposition, with its possibility of absolutely isolating and separating subject and predicate, seems an appropriate form of expression for the speculative content. But what, well, that's a just question, then are the ways in which speculative content destroys the traditional form of judgment? Question mark. First, despite the fact that speculative critique of the form of predicative proposition is a critique of Kant Hegel's speculative reinterpretation of the structure of judgments is possible only as a result of Kant's insight into the ternary structure of his proposition. The germ of speculation lies in this triplicity alone, and the triplicity and ternary structure, it's the same thing. It comes in three. Hegel writes in Thasian Knowledge, indeed at the beginning of paragraph 19 of the second deduction of transcendental logic, in Critique of Pure Reason, Kant admits that he is not satisfied with the logician's definition of judgment as a representation of a relation between two concepts. That's not enough. I think an educated guess is that he would have preferred a function rather than a relation. And for those who remember what the difference between a function and a relation is, I'm really happy. Otherwise, I would refer to lecture 154, if I remember it correctly. It's important when we start talking about sequence and mixing function and relation up, or calling them both for relation. It's a cause of a lot of problems within thinking and propositional logic as well. What he recognizes that for judgment to be possible, a third element or medium must be added to the two relating concepts. For Kant, this medium is self-consciousness. And it ties the relation between the two concepts to the originary synthetic unity of apperception. This third term, according to Kant, explains the synthetic character of proposition or judgment. Even Hegel finds fault with this Kantian explanation of judgment, which, since the medium of self-consciousness is not for Kant a concept, remains formally a binary synthesis of subject and predicate. Kant's hypothesis of a ternary structure of the proposition serves as the starting point for Hegel's development of the speculative proposition, and that is thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And what Hegel does is to develop the simple